From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Yet, as we share their hopes,
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech to Congress is interrupted by a protester shouting, "Stop Israel war crimes and equal rights for Palestinians." We'll speak with the Code Pink organizer who was taken to the hospital after undercover security forces dragged her away. And we'll get reaction to Netanyahu's speech from Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative. Then President Obama is going to Puerto Rico for the first presidential visit since JFK went half a century ago.
It is a great experience to fly many hundreds of miles into the Atlantic Ocean, to come to an island and be greeted in Spanish, to come to an island which has an entirely different tradition and history, which is made up of people of an entirely different cultural origin than on the mainland of the United States.
We'll speak with Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez about the significance of Puerto Rico, as well as his newly updated book, Harvest of Empire, A History of Latinos in America. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Egypt's top prosecutor has announced ousted President Hosni Mubarak will stand trial on charges of ordering the killing of protesters during the uprising against his three-decade rule. Mubarak faces charges that include premeditated murder, which could carry the death penalty. He's accused of having collaborated with his former interior minister and some police authorities in orchestrating the murder of civilians involved in the peaceful protests that swept through Egypt earlier this year. In addition to his alleged role in the killing of protesters, Mubarak has also been charged with misusing power, deliberately wasting public funds, and unlawfully making private financial gains. Mubarak's sons, Alaa and Gamal, were also referred to the public court on the same charges. NATO forces are continuing an intensified bombing campaign in the Libyan capital of Tripoli. For the second day in a row, Western warplanes struck areas in and around the city. The Libyan government says the strikes have killed 19 people. South African President Jacob Zuma has announced he will visit Tripoli next week for talks. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The U.S., meanwhile, has bolstered ties with Libyan rebels, offering the National Transitional Council a representative office in Washington. Assistant Secretary of State Jeffrey Feltman announced the move after meeting rebel leaders in Benghazi.
As we have said many times, and as President Obama emphasized in his oral message from yesterday, in attacking, threatening, and brutally suppressing the Libyan people, Colonel Gaddafi has lost legitimacy to rule. He cannot regain control of Libya, and he must step down immediately.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared before a joint session of Congress Tuesday to press his rejection of a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders. Netanyahu repeated his stance that Israel will retain the large settlement blocks that carve up the West Bank.
in any real peace agreement, in any peace agreement that ends the conflict, some settlements will end up beyond Israel's borders. Now, the precise delineation of those borders must be negotiated. We'll be generous about the size of the future Palestinian state. But as President Obama said, the border will be different than the one that existed on June 4th, 1967. Israel will not return to the indefensible boundaries of 1967.
Netanyahu's speech drew 29 standing ovations from the bipartisan audience, surpassing the 25 standing ovations President Obama received during his 2011 State of the Union address. While lawmakers applauded, a Jewish peace activist was arrested after rising to protest Netanyahu's speech. In the West Bank, Palestinian aide Saeb Erekat said Netanyahu's comments prove he has no interest in real peace.
Mr. Netanyahu's speech proved tonight with no doubt that we, as Palestinians, as Arabs, we don't have a partner for peace in Israel. This was a statement of public relations. This was a statement of someone who wants to dictate the results of negotiations before they begin. He dictated that Jerusalem will be undivided, that refugees cannot return, that his army would remain on the borders, that his settlements will be expanded and kept, that he wants Palestine to be demilitarized, and he wants us to call Israel with another name than the name it's registered at the UN.
We'll have more on Netanyahu's address after headlines. The death toll from the tornado that devastated Joplin, Missouri over the weekend continues to rise, with 123 people reportedly killed and an estimated 750 injured. Rescue workers are searching through the wreckage of some 2,000 buildings in an effort to find survivors. It was the single deadliest twister to touch down in the United States since 1947, with winds reaching 200 miles per hour. Similar weather wreaked havoc in nearby states Tuesday. A series of tornadoes ripped through Oklahoma, killing 5 people and injuring at least 60 others outside Oklahoma City. Meanwhile, in Kansas, 2 people were killed by extreme weather and 2 more were reported dead in Arkansas. On a visit to Britain, President Obama paid tribute to the victims.
Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with the families who are suffering at this moment. All we can do is let them know that all of America cares deeply about them, and that we are going to do absolutely everything we can to make sure that they recover.
President Obama is in Britain on the second stop of a 4-nation European visit. On Tuesday, a crowd of peace activists held a rally outside the gates of Buckingham Palace as Obama visited the royal family.
The reality is he is pursuing George Bush's wars. There's more troops in Afghanistan now than there was when he got elected. There's still 50,000 troops in Iraq. There's attacks on Pakistan. And now, of course, he's been part of a third attack on a Muslim country in 10 years, the bombing of Libya. And we oppose all of these things, and we believe that the American foreign policy isn't changing and has to change.
Violent clashes are intensifying in Yemen as longtime President Ali Abdullah Saleh refuses to step down. At least 21 people were killed Tuesday when Saleh's forces clashed with the guards of a prominent anti-government tribal leader in the capital, Sana'a. Yemen has been locked in unrest for 4 months, with anti-government demonstrators calling for an end to President Saleh's 33 years in office. 2 Syrian human rights groups claim to have documented the names of over 1,100 civilians killed in the 9-week crackdown on anti-government protesters. In addition to the dead, over 10,000 people have reportedly been arrested. The boxing legend Muhammad Ali has joined the families of the jailed U.S. hikers Shane Bauer and Josh Fatal to appeal for their release from Iran. Bauer and Fatal, along with Sarah Shourd, were arrested in June 2009 while hiking near the Iran-Iraq border. Shourd was freed last year. Muhammad Ali's wife, Lani Ali, read a statement on his behalf.
We ask for their release, their compassionate release, and the mercy that they showed to Sarah, to show the same to Josh and to Shane, because they too are citizens of the world. If they will look at them as the world looked at Muhammad when he was a young man, in the same fashion, wanting to experience the world, experience people.
Bauer and Fatal were due to be tried on espionage charges this month, but their trial was unexpectedly delayed. The pair's mothers, Cindy Hickey and Laura Fatal, also spoke.
Now 662 days since Shane and Josh were detained by Iranian forces. This is far too long. Shane and Josh are innocent. They have suffered long enough. Our families have also suffered.
Josh and Shane have committed no crime. We believe they are being punished simply because of their nationality. Their isolation is extreme.
Laura Fatal and Cindy Hickey. The Obama administration has unveiled new sanctions against Venezuela's state oil company and 6 other global firms involved in trade with Iran. Deputy Secretary of State James Steinberg unveiled the sanctions in Washington.
This administration, which is the first to impose sanctions on firms under the Iran Sanctions Act, has been working aggressively to prevent Iran from developing its energy sector. Iran uses revenues from its energy sector to fund its nuclear program, as well as to mask procurement of dual-use items. Today's actions adds further pressure on Iran to comply with its international obligations.
A nuclear watchdog is urging Japan to widen the evacuation zone around the stricken Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. France's Institute for Radiological Protection and Nuclear Safety says around 70,000 people remain in a northwestern area it calls the most contaminated territory outside the evacuation zone. The U.S. Justice Department has issued a new subpoena to a New York Times reporter to reveal his sources for a 2006 book on the CIA. The reporter, James Risen, has been ordered to testify at the trial of former CIA officer Jeffrey Sterling. Protesters believe Sterling gave Risen information for a chapter on the CIA's role in disrupting Iran's nuclear program. In a motion filed this week, prosecutors argued Risen's not exempted from testifying about confidential sources in a criminal proceeding and that he must provide information, quote, like any other citizen. A federal judge threw out a similar subpoena leveled at Risen last year. A new study says Congress members routinely outperform the stock market in their personal investments. Researchers pored over some 16,000 stock transactions by around 300 lawmakers from 1985 through 2001, finding what they called, quote, significant positive abnormal returns of around 6% per year. The report speculates the lawmakers' gains could stem from their ability to trade on non-public information and vote in favor of their economic interests. And Democrats have scored a major upset with a special election victory in a traditionally Republican upstate New York district. On Tuesday, Democratic nominee Kathy Hochul was elected to Congress in a win that seemed impossible just 2 months ago. The election was widely viewed as a referendum on the Republican plan to dismantle Medicare. Hochul addressed a group of supporters to celebrate her win.
The people I met in the diners, the small businesses on the farms, the people in this room, I will represent you with my heart and soul, and thank you so much for this extreme privilege.
Hochul is replacing former Republican Congressmember Christopher Lee, who resigned this year following the disclosure he attempted to arrange an extramarital affair online. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy